Time to say a very, very good morning to Stewart Jackson, founder, director and strategic counsel at Political Insight, former Conservative MP, of course. Stewart, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
We're very excited about this poll that we conducted yesterday because, first of all, to get 28,000 people to take part in a Twitter poll is pretty extraordinary anyway, but for so many of them to want to tell the government, to give the message, to lift us out of these restrictions is quite remarkable.
Yeah, I think what the government needs to be mindful of is that the public have cut them quite a bit of slack over the last 9 or 10 months, and they understand that it's very, very difficult to make the decisions. You've got cabinet government, you've got scientific advisors, you've got backbenchers, you've got business and commerce, and you're not going to always get it right. But I think they have to remember that Boris's main selling point is hope, positivity and optimism, and that's what they've got to offer people. And Grant Shapps is a great guy, and I think he's done a brilliant job as Transport Secretary. But
yeah, I mean, I think we all acknowledge, Stuart, that it hasn't been easy for them because the thing has lurched from one sort of ridiculous crisis to another. And I think, on balance, you'd have to say I'm not one of those that will look back and say they should have done this, they should have done that. No Captain Hindsighting for me. But I think we all now have reached this point, haven't we, where we think, well, let's do something else.
Yeah, and I think the issue is that by Easter we need to be back to normal. We need a big dose of normality. I think we can bank some great successes. We have been a global leader. We've been world beaters on vaccination and the logistics and organisation of that. We have done the best of any country in the world. Given how big we are, we're 67 million people. We're not a tiny country like United Arab Emirates or a modest country like Israel. We're a big G7 country, and we've done a brilliant job. But people put that aside and they say, look, we've got to have a future. We've got to have something positive to look forward to. And for a lot of people, that is meeting the family again, but principally having a decent holiday. And I don't necessarily agree that being draconian, I actually don't agree with this 10-year term for possibly not being truthful about flying in from Portugal. The idea that you can, because you've ticked the wrong form, that you can go to prison for 10 years, right, and yet you can rape and pillage and assault and do violent crime and you get a slap on the wrist. Yeah. It's got a discordant tone to it, and I just think it's silly and it was unnecessary.
Yeah, I don't think he did himself any favours with that, Matt Hancock. And also a lot of legal people have since been talking about it, saying they don't even think that it's enforceable in any way, shape or form, because the government can't just suddenly invent punishments for people for new crimes that yesterday weren't crimes.
Well, what worries me is that we saw it a long time ago, of course, in the Second World War, where you bring in specific proposals and laws to deal with a unique situation, that when that situation has subsided, you end up keeping those laws on the statute books. And the idea that you can unilaterally decide to imprison someone travelling, someone of good character previously, for 10 years without primary legislation, i.e. a bill, that you tack it on to secondary legislation in a committee in Parliament, that worries me, because if you can do it once, you can do it several more times. Yeah. Look, I'm a Conservative. We have a Conservative government. One day we won't. We'll have a Labour government or another party, and they might misuse those powers. Yeah. And that worries me.
Well, quite frankly, it also gives the idea to me that if they can do that for people who are citizens of this country coming back from holiday, why can't they do it for people coming here illegally on dinghies from France? Lock them up for 10 years. Hey?
Exactly. And I do think there is mixed messages. The government is under enormous pressure over this, and we're a very complex society, and governance is difficult. One of the reasons they're reviewing the Health and Social Care Act of 2012, not before time, is because it's a bureaucratic disaster. That what people like Matt Hancock found is they pulled the levers in Whitehall last spring to try and deal with the emergency of COVID, and nothing happened for several weeks and months because there was too much devolution of power, too much autonomy at the local level, and government could not effect a national policy on health. And that's why they're having to do that again. And I think the good thing about a review of how COVID has been dealt with, is that these parts of government, procurement, the civil service, Whitehall, will be looked at again. And hopefully we'll learn the lessons of Kate Bingham and the vaccine task force.
Yes.
And how that's been successful.
Well, there's no question that there have been very, very good things that have come out of this and some very, very bad things, and both of which should feed into a better future for everyone, I think, Stewart, as well. And isn't it interesting, though, that those who would say the government has not done anything right say the NHS has been brilliant with the vaccine rollout, completely and utterly forgetting, in fact, that it was organised, perhaps outside the NHS, and the NHS has been part of it. But equally, the NHS has been rather slow to act in certain ways. We've discovered that there's an awful lot of bureaucracy inside of it, an awful lot of red tape. Nothing wrong with what happens at the sharp end of it. But in terms of the way the operations are all planned, in terms of the way that staffing rotas seem to be done, I mean, there's an awful lot that can be fixed there.
Yeah, but we're spending over £120 billion a year on the NHS. We deserve a decent service, and we largely do get a good service. What worries me is it's been deified as a sort of quasi-religious entity by people like Angela Rayner,
right,
who are writing these childish letters to Matt Hancock saying you've been beastly about the NHS, which isn't true. He's been a great champion of the NHS, but which government can't look at expenditure and say we could do that better? And the reason we have succeeded on the vaccines is because the private sector has worked with government, with brilliant people like Kate Bingham, who all these whinging lefties were saying, oh, she's a crony, she's got no skills, she's only there because she's someone's wife, which is inherently very misogynistic.
It is. Well, they love a bit of misogyny, the lefties, Stuart.
She's a smart woman, and she's delivered the goods. And, I think there are lessons to learn about social care, about care homes and all the rest of it. But let's not obscure the fact that this government has been hugely successful on basically vaccinating as we speak. The thick end of 14 million people.
Yeah.
It's pretty good in about 6 weeks.
It's been absolutely extraordinary. But I think there is now a sort of crossing over point where people are saying, well, all right, that's great. We're happy to congratulate you. But now let's see the results of all of that. Let's see some benefit, because you told us last year that once the vaccination programme started, we'd be able to start lifting the lockdown. And that we're still waiting for.
Well, you've got the Prime Minister's statement he's going to make on, I think, the 22nd of February. Yeah. That's very important. And I do think that will be a game changer, because that will be a roadmap out of this hideous disaster, hopefully. And I don't think we're going to, I mean, people are saying that we're going to be fully free of COVID by Christmas. That's too long. We need to be aware of the roadmap by May or June at the latest.
Well, also, how about, Stuart, we're never going to be free of it. So that's really the wrong conversation to be trying to have.
No, I agree with you there. It will always be with us, like the flu's always with us. We're just going to have to adapt quickly to how the COVID pandemic actually mutates over time. The other thing, Mike, is of course we're going to have the budget, and it's going to be on the 3rd of March an opportunity for Rishi Sunak to help those people, many people who are self-employed, many people in travel and tourism and leisure and hospitality who have really struggled over the last 12 months. And I think he will rise to the challenge, because he understands how important that is.
Absolutely right. But let's not forget as well that these draconian rules that are coming in are going to affect ordinary people. I mean, we had a call yesterday from a woman up in Aberdeen whose daughter's in New Zealand. She wants to come back to take part in the lambing season. And I said to her, she might be able to come in as some kind of agricultural worker. But they live in Scotland. Because Scotland's now got different rules, that basically New Zealand is a bad country, just like all the other red list countries. She's going to have to quarantine at a cost of $17.50 when she gets back. She's already done 2 weeks quarantine in New Zealand. She's already had to have 2 tests done at her own expense. So she's basically spent $4,000 before she's even bought an airline ticket. Yeah,
it's very, very sad that that's impacted on people. And I think you touch on a very important point. I mean, you and I we do like a bit of sturgeon bashing, and there's plenty more where that came from.
Well, I think that's going to be going on for a while.
Yeah, I mean, that's a story that's going to run and run. And I think you'll see the cult of lust sturgeon falling apart in the next 6 months as we see the really vicious fight with Alex Salmond. But on the substantive point, I think that what COVID has shown is that there has to be a limit to devolution, frankly. You can't have a situation where you've got 4 jurisdictions in the United Kingdom when you're trying to deal with a pandemic that's global and national. And I think there needs to be a review of the fact that Sturgeon has sometimes sought to politicise the way that the Scottish government has reacted to COVID to distinguish herself from the UK government. And I think that is an important issue. But, you know, Scots are smart people. I don't think they're going to vote for independence, and they can see through the politicking. They may not particularly like Boris Johnson, but I think they're fair and they understand that, again, you know, the government has had some successes as well.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think apart from the fanatics up there, most people have now seen through the project, such as it is, and they've seen through the kind of the one-party state that they've been creating for the best part of the last 10 years, where things in the country have actually got worse. You know, healthcare is worse, education is worse, drug deaths are worse than Europe. You know, sort of poverty levels that you haven't seen in the rest of Britain for many a year. And it really is all down to the SNP, who have been fully in charge of Scotland now for a very long time.
Well, they've been in charge, I think I'm right in saying, they've been in charge for getting on for 15 years.
Yeah.
And, you know, the message is concentrate on the day job. You know, you're not the Minister for Independence. You're the First Minister of Scotland, which is a proud independent nation already in terms of its legal system and its education system. But you're right, it has pockets of massive poverty, it has huge problems with healthcare, particularly drugs. It's got declining education standards. And Sturgeon needs to refocus on that, because there will come a time when both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party are more credible in Scotland, and the SNP will not be in power forever.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, as I say, I don't think there will be an independence referendum. I do think if there is, that the Scottish people will understand that the pain of leaving the United Kingdom will be as nothing with what they claim is the pain of Brexit.
Well, some of the most deprived people in Europe live in Nicola Sturgeon's constituency in Glasgow. So, you know, I mean, that tells you all you need to know, really, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about that other bastion of democracy, the European Union, Stuart, because, of course, we've seen their absolute debacle and disaster over the vaccine rollout. But this morning, I'm reading in the Telegraph that the Governor of the Bank of England is worried that the EU is poised to lock Britain out of its banking market. Now, this could be a bit more hyperbole coming from Brussels, but what do you make of it?
Well, you know, Mike, I've always said that one of the strategic objectives of the EU is to make Brexit so painful for the UK that it will persuade other countries like Italy that might be thinking of leaving the European Union that it's just too much trouble and too painful. My own view is that this is rhetoric, because the fallout of seeking to undermine the world's number one or two financial centre, the City of London, will be significantly felt in access to capital, in investment and other areas. And, you know, the European Union has still got very significant problems about its own financial situation, its debt levels, immigration, vaccines. And I think an aggressive approach to the UK will be foolish. And if we've learned anything in the last 2 or 3 weeks, is that often these highly politicized actions do backfire. You only have to look at the suspension of Article 16 of the Northern Ireland Protocol. You know, basically the EU had to eat humble pie and grovel to the Irish government and the UK government for their ridiculous over-egging of the pudding. They are going to have to move on the Northern Ireland Protocol, because I think it's going to affect their business as well. And I actually think ultimately, you know, Michael Gove and his counterpart will come to an agreement on the Northern Ireland Protocol. It was going to be bumpy for the first few months. They're very sore about us leaving. They're very emotional about it, particularly the Germans, because for them it's a redemptive project, the EU. But we just have to keep our nerve, carry on. You only have to look at, for instance, the Road Haulage Association that was saying, you know, we've lost 68% of our business since last year. When you actually look at the figures, it's nearer 18%. Yeah. And that's largely as a result of the impact of COVID and people stockpiling in the run up to Christmas. So there's a lot of heat, there's not often a lot of light.
Well, I was always very surprised to find that the Road Haulage Association was a very Remainy organisation, and they took every opportunity they could to criticise any plans that we had for Brexit, and they're still seemingly not very happy that it's actually happened. But it seems to me the one thing that I am surprised about is that old Ursula von der Leyen, as I like to call her, is actually a worse EU commissioner, sober, than old Jean-Claude Juncker was after lunch.
Well, he was a character, Jean-Claude Juncker, and he was basically, as former prime ministers of Luxembourg go, a great guy, really.
Yeah, I can't think of any others, to be honest.
No. Well, they're like a 53 bus. You wait long enough, another one will come along. But
they won't work very well.
No, Ursula got out as with a lamentable performance as defence minister in the German government just in time, and was slotted by Merkel into the role as president of the EU Commission. I think she has made huge mistakes, and I think she's just about survived if they can get back on track with the vaccine. But as I say, we've gone now. It's time for us to make our own way in terms of regulations, directives, our own laws. And I think it is a very positive global future for the UK. But clearly some sectors are going to be affected. The Road Haulage Association, in my experience as a special advisor, never missed an opportunity to have a go about how disastrous Brexit was. So they're consistent. But I would say to them, they need to get their facts right. And let's see where we are in 6 months. I think things will be in a much better position.
No, I think that's absolutely right. Stuart, great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Stewart Jackson, founder, director, strategic counsel at Political Insight, also former Conservative MP, of course. Yes, the European Union is still sulking, believe it or not, and they're now threatening that they will not allow our banking organisations access into the European banking system. Well, I've got news for them, actually, because, of course, the British Centre of Financial Industry is London. The European Centre of Financial Industry is London. Financial services headquartered here from around the world in London. It's one of the most powerful and most wealthy areas in financial services in the entire world. Bigger than New York, bigger than Hong Kong, bigger than Singapore, bigger than Dubai. It's London. So if the EU wants to ignore it, that's fine.